The flight attendant's voice rose loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm going to ask you one last time. Move to the back of the plane, or I will call security." Her words carried a sharp edge, her tone dripping with condescension. Nathan, the black man, calm as ever, looked up at her. "I've already told you. I'm not moving," he said simply. His tone was even, almost soothing, but it held an undeniable strength. He was humiliated in front of everyone, but no one expected what would happen next when the man they thought was powerless stood up and revealed who he really was. As we delve into this story, if you believe everyone should be treated with respect, no matter what their color is, click the subscribe button now and tell us where you're watching from. The plane gleamed under the afternoon sun, its sleek design promising a luxurious journey for its passengers. Inside, the cabin was nothing short of opulence. Plush leather seats, gold accents, and an air of exclusivity that made everyone inside feel like royalty. Passengers moved with ease, their expensive luggage rolling behind them as they were ushered toward the sleek private jet waiting on the tarmac. Soon they settled into their spots, some scrolling through their devices, others sipping champagne, offered by the attentive flight crew. Inside the plane, soft ambient music played in the background. Among them was Nathan Williams, a calm and composed man in his late 30s, dressed in a tailored navy blazer and matching slacks. Nathan exuded understated elegance, moving with quiet confidence, though he made no effort to draw attention to himself. Nathan Williams stepped into the cabin, his calm presence drawing subtle attention. His steps were measured, and his gaze swept the cabin briefly before he moved toward his seat. His destination wasn't just another trip. It was a journey to oversee his growing empire, though no one on board yet knew who he was. He preferred it that way, for now. Lauren, the lead flight attendant, stood near the entrance, her crisp uniform perfectly tailored, her sharp features exuding control. She greeted the passengers one by one, her smile warm for some, colder for others. She prided herself on keeping order on the plane, though her idea of order often depended on how people looked or behaved. Lauren's welcoming tone shifted subtly, as she greeted Nathan with a curt, "Welcome aboard," the warmth noticeably absent. Behind Nathan, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond sat, the couple in their 60s exuding the ease of seasoned travelers. Mrs. Raymond clutched a small knitting bag, her fingers already twitching to begin her work. Mr. Raymond carried a folded newspaper, his expression one of mild curiosity as he took in the scene. Lauren's smile brightened for them. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond. Lovely to have you with us again." Nathan glanced over his shoulder, noticing the stark contrast in Lauren's tone. His expression remained calm, though his eyes reflected an awareness of the unspoken dynamics at play. As other passengers settled, Lauren moved through the cabin, ensuring everything was in place. She checked on the Raymond couple, offering them a bright smile. "Is there anything I can get for you before we take off?" Mrs. Raymond shook her head politely, already absorbed in her knitting. Mr. Raymond nodded toward his coffee, indicating he was satisfied. When Lauren passed Nathan, her demeanor shifted again. She glanced at his bag, resting neatly under the seat, and her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't offer the same courtesy or warmth, simply walking by without a word. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's attitude shifted based on appearances? Share your experience in the comments below and click on the subscribe button. Lauren Reed, in her early 40s, carried herself with the precision of someone who thrived on control. Her pristine uniform and perfectly coiffed hair matched her sharp demeanor. To Lauren, appearances mattered more than anything else, and her judgments were swift and unapologetic. Her eyes narrowed as she watched Nathan settle in. Something about him didn't sit right with her. Not his clothes, not his calm self-assurance, not the fact that he didn't immediately seek attention like many of the passengers Lauren deemed worthy of respect. In Lauren's mind, Nathan simply didn't belong. She approached him with quick, purposeful strides, her lips curling into a tight smile. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her tone polite but dripping with condescension. "I think you're in the wrong section." Nathan glanced up at her, his expression calm. "I believe this is my seat," he replied, his voice steady. Lauren's smile didn't waver, but her tone sharpened. "I don't think so. This section is reserved for our elite passengers." Nearby, the other passengers began to notice the exchange. A nosy socialite leaned slightly to get a better view. Her curiosity piqued. A friendly businessman across the aisle glanced over, frowning slightly at Lauren's tone. Nathan remained composed, his gaze steady as he replied, "You might want to double-check your passenger list before making assumptions." Lauren's eyebrows arched, her irritation barely hidden. "I don't need to check anything," she said sharply. "I know who belongs here and who doesn't." The tension in the cabin thickened. Passengers exchanged glances, whispering quietly to each other. Others, uncomfortable, pretended not to notice. One passenger muttered, "Why doesn't he just move if he's in the wrong seat?" Another shrugged. "He's probably trying to sneak in for a free upgrade." Lauren crossed her arms, standing her ground. "If you don't move to the back of the plane," she said, her voice loud enough for others to hear, "I'll have to call security." Nathan tilted his head slightly, his calm expression unwavering. "Call whoever you need to," he said, "but I'm not moving." The nosy socialite gasped softly. The businessman leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Lauren, now visibly frustrated, turned to the junior flight attendant, Grace, who stood nearby watching nervously. "Grace," Lauren snapped, "escort him to the back now." Grace hesitated, glancing between Nathan and Lauren. She wanted to speak up, to say something about checking the passenger list as Nathan had suggested, but Lauren's sharp glare froze her in place. Reluctantly, she nodded and stepped forward. Nathan shifted slightly in his seat, his calm demeanor still intact. "You might want to think carefully about what you're doing," he said softly, his words carrying more weight than Lauren realized. Lauren scoffed, waving off the warning. "I know exactly what I'm doing," she said. "Now get up." What would you do if someone treated you like this on a flight? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you're loving this story so far, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more stories like this. Lauren's tone grew sharper as she gestured toward the back of the plane. "You're not supposed to be here," she said again, her voice now tinged with impatience. The passengers watched in stunned silence, the tension crackling in the air, like static. Nathan leaned back slightly, his gaze steady on Lauren. "You shouldn't make assumptions about people," he said quietly. Lauren's smirk widened. "And you shouldn't be in seats you didn't pay for." The cliffhanger came as Nathan finally picked up his phone, his calm expression unchanging. He typed something quickly, then set it back down on the armrest. "You're making a mistake," he said simply, his words hanging in the air. Lauren didn't listen. "We'll see about that," she muttered, gesturing again for Grace to act. The junior attendant stepped closer, her hesitation palpable as the scene continued to unfold. Lauren's irritation only grew as Nathan remained seated, his quiet confidence a stark contrast to her increasingly flustered demeanor. The tension in the cabin thickened with every passing moment, drawing the attention of nearby passengers who watched the exchange with curiosity and disbelief. Lauren's voice rose loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm going to ask you one last time. Move to the back of the plane, or I will call security." Her words carried a sharp edge, her tone dripping with condescension. Nathan, calm as ever, looked up at Lauren. "I've already told you I'm not moving," he said simply. His tone was even, almost soothing, but it held an undeniable strength that only infuriated Lauren further. A woman ahead, the nosy socialite with perfectly coiffed hair and an air of entitlement, leaned toward her companion. She whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "Looks like he's trying to sneak in for a free ride." Lauren seized on the comment, her smirk returning. "That's exactly what it looks like," she said, folding her arms and turning to the other passengers as though rallying support. "We have rules for a reason. Some people just don't respect them." Nathan didn't respond to the insults or the growing murmurs around him. Instead, he kept his gaze steady on Lauren, his composure a quiet defiance that spoke louder than any words. Grace hesitated, then took a step toward the passenger list clipped near the cockpit door. Her fingers trembled as she scanned the names, hoping to find something that would help Nathan. But before she could say anything, Lauren snapped, "Grace, what are you doing?" Grace turned, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just checking. I've got this under control," Lauren interrupted, her tone sharp. "You don't need to get involved." Grace stepped back, her face flushing with embarrassment. She bit her lip, torn between doing what she knew was right and the fear of losing her job. As the tension built, a kindly-looking man seated across the aisle leaned forward. The businessman, dressed in a crisp suit and exuding a calm demeanor, smiled at Nathan. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Is everything all right?" Nathan turned to him, his expression softening. "I'm fine, thank you," he replied, his voice steady but grateful for the small act of kindness. Before the businessman could say more, Lauren interjected, her tone accusing. "Sir, I'd appreciate it if you didn't encourage the disturbance." She turned back to Nathan, pointing a finger at him. "You're causing a scene," the businessman frowned. "From where I'm sitting," he said calmly, "you're the one making a scene." Lauren's face flushed with anger, and she turned, her attention back to Nathan. "I've had enough of this," she snapped. "Either you move, or I'll make sure you're escorted off this plane." Nathan met her gaze without flinching. "You can try," he said softly. Lauren's frustration boiled over, her voice shaking as she leaned closer to Nathan. "Why don't you just admit you're in the wrong seat and stop wasting everyone's time?" Nathan remained silent, his calmness only fueling Lauren's anger. Finally, Lauren left Nathan alone and turned to carry out her other duties angrily. She moved briskly down the aisle, her polished shoes clicking softly on the carpet. She carried a tray of sparkling water, her demeanor professional but her expression tight with irritation. Nathan sat quietly in his seat, his attention focused on the book in his hands. Passengers chatted softly, the atmosphere calm until Lauren's subtle hostility began to surface. Nathan had been waiting patiently for a drink, watching as Lauren served Mr. and Mrs. Raymond first, then moved to others in the back. Lauren, however, made no effort to acknowledge Nathan. The tray was nearly empty when Nathan finally spoke, his tone gentle. "Excuse me, could I have some water, please?" Lauren paused, glancing at Nathan with a dismissive look. "I'll get to you when I can," she said curtly, walking past without another word. Nathan's calm gaze followed Lauren's retreating figure, but he remained silent. "What would you do if you noticed this kind of behavior? Would you step in or stay? Quiet? Let us know in the comments below." Minutes passed, and Nathan shifted in his seat, trying to find a more comfortable position. He stretched one leg slightly into the aisle, his movement unassuming. Lauren returned, tray in hand, her sharp eyes catching the small adjustment. Instead of asking Nathan to move his leg, Lauren deliberately changed her path. In an instant, Lauren's foot struck Nathan's leg, the tray tilted, and the glasses of water tumbled forward, splashing onto Nathan's lap and the floor. Lauren gasped theatrically, her voice sharp and loud. "Watch where you're putting your legs! You've caused a mess!" Passengers turned their heads, startled by the commotion. Nathan looked up, startled but composed, his hands brushing at the water on his trousers. "You walked into my leg," he said calmly. Lauren's face flushed with anger. She stepped closer, her frustration boiling over. "You think you can talk to me like that?" she hissed, her voice sharp. And then, in a shocking moment, unable to contain herself, Lauren raised her hand and slapped Nathan across the face. The sound echoed through the cabin, sharp and shocking, like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the passengers. The businessman stood halfway, his face a mix of disbelief and anger. Grace's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Even the nosy socialite appeared taken aback, her previous smirk replaced by a look of unease. Nathan slowly straightened, his hand resting calmly on his lap, his expression composed. His gaze remained steady as he looked up at Lauren. The cabin was silent, the tension palpable. Nathan straightened in his seat, his expression unchanged, but his eyes carrying a weight that made Lauren hesitate for the first time. "You just made the worst mistake of your life," he said quietly, his voice calm but cutting through the air like a knife. What would you do if you were in Nathan's shoes? Let us know in the comments below, and if this story has you hooked, hit like and subscribe now. Nathan looked up at Lauren, his voice steady and composed. "I've been patient with you, but your behavior has crossed the line," he said, his words deliberate and firm. Lauren's expression darkened, her jaw tightened, and her hands clenched at her sides. "Cross the line?" she snapped, her voice rising. "You're the one who's been disruptive since you got on this plane." Nathan didn't flinch. He didn't touch his face or respond in kind. Instead, he slowly straightened his posture, his gaze fixed firmly on Lauren. His calm demeanor remained intact, even in the face of such blatant aggression. "You'll regret that," Nathan said softly, his voice carrying a quiet authority that seemed to fill the entire cabin. Lauren faltered for a moment, her confidence shaken by Nathan's unyielding composure, but she quickly recovered, scoffing loudly. "Regret it?" she sneered. "What are you going to do, call the police?" Nathan didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence spoke volumes, and the passengers could feel the shift in power. From the corner of the cabin, Grace, the younger flight attendant, watched the scene unfold with a mixture of horror and determination. She had been quietly observing Lauren's behavior all day, her discomfort growing with every passing moment. Now she knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. Discreetly, Grace stepped away from the commotion and pulled out her phone. She dialed a number quickly, her fingers trembling slightly. When the call connected, her voice was hushed but firm. "It's Grace," she said. "We have a situation on the plane." Grace returned to her post, her face a mix of worry and determination. Lauren, oblivious to the call, stood with her arms crossed, her anger simmering but her authority waning. Nathan remained seated, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Lauren's rage. Passengers continued to watch, their eyes darting between Nathan and Lauren, unsure of what would happen next. One of them leaned toward Nathan, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" she asked, her concern genuine. Nathan turned to her, offering a small, reassuring smile. "I'm fine," he said softly. The tension in the cabin was palpable, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the plane's engines. It was clear that the situation was far from over. Nathan remained seated, his posture steady despite the water dripping onto his clothing. He looked at Lauren, his voice calm but firm. "All you had to do was treat me with respect, but you failed because of your prejudice, thinking I don't belong here just because you feel so." Lauren's irritation deepened, her grip on the tray tightening as she leaned closer, her tone mocking. "Respect? Maybe you should earn it first. People, like you don't deserve my respect." The tension in the cabin was palpable. Passengers exchanged glances, some shifting in their seats, unsure of how to react. The unspoken question lingered in the air. How far would this go? At this point, Nathan's anger rose. "You shouldn't have said that," he said, his voice sharp but firm. His words carried an unspoken weight, leaving everyone in the cabin wondering what would happen next. Lauren folded her arms, her anger still simmering. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "I've been more than patient with you. Maybe now you'll understand that actions have consequences." Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly, his calm demeanor still unbroken. "You're right," he said softly, his words deliberate. "Actions do have consequences, and you're about to find out just how true that is." For a moment, Lauren faltered. Something in Nathan's tone sent a chill down her spine, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. "I'm not afraid of your empty threats," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "You're the one who'll regret this, not me." Lauren turned away, feigning confidence, but deep inside, unease began to creep in. She had crossed a line, and though she wouldn't admit it, she knew it. The looks from the passengers, the horrified expression on Grace's face, and Nathan's quiet composure. It all made Lauren feel as though the walls were closing in. She tried to shake it off, but her thoughts raced. What if this man isn't who I think he is? The way Nathan carried himself, the way he spoke with such calm authority, it didn't match Lauren's assumptions. For the first time, a sliver of doubt pierced her anger. Lauren's unease grew stronger as she replayed the moment in her mind. Why didn't he yell or fight back? Why did he say I'd regret it? Her stomach twisted as the realization hit her. She had let her prejudice and anger take over, and now she could smell trouble coming. Lauren glanced around the cabin, hoping to find some support, but the passengers were no longer on her side. The businessman glared at her, his arms crossed in silent judgment. The nosy socialite whispered to her companion, shaking her head disapprovingly. Grace looked like she wanted to disappear, her hands trembling as she clutched the passenger list. Nathan, meanwhile, remained seated, his expression calm but unreadable. He crossed his legs slowly, leaning back in his seat with a quiet confidence. That made Lauren's unease grow deeper. Nathan didn't have to raise his voice. He didn't have to act out. His silence said everything Lauren didn't want to hear. The tension in the cabin thickened as Lauren tried to regain control of the situation, but no matter what she said or did, she couldn't shake the feeling that her actions would soon catch up to her. Nathan's words echoed in her mind. "You're making a mistake." Unbeknownst to Lauren, Nathan had already sent a message, and his quiet response to the slap wasn't submission, it was strategy. Trouble was brewing, and Lauren was about to find out just how big of a mistake she had made. What do you think Nathan should do next? Let us know in the comments. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. The tension in the cabin was thick, with Lauren pacing back and forth near Nathan's seat, her frustration bubbling over. Nathan remained seated, calm and composed, as though the situation wasn't affecting him at all. But deep down, Lauren could feel the weight of her actions pressing in on her. Nathan, without a word, reached for his phone. His movements were deliberate, and he typed something quickly before setting the device on the armrest beside him. The gesture seemed simple, but it carried an unspoken power that made Lauren glance uneasily at the phone. "What do you think you're doing?" Lauren asked, her voice sharp. Nathan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back slightly, his calm demeanor unwavering. "You'll find out soon enough," he said softly, his words carrying a weight that made Lauren's unease deepen. If you think Lauren's reaction was uncalled for, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The cabin fell into an uneasy silence, broken only by the faint hum of the plane's engines. Passengers exchanged glances, whispering among themselves. The nosy socialite leaned toward her companion, her voice barely a whisper. "What's going on? Do you think he's someone important?" The businessman across the aisle sat quietly, a knowing look on his face. He tapped his fingers against the armrest, his gaze fixed on Nathan as though he had pieced together something no one else had. Minutes later, the sound of footsteps came from the front of the cabin. The cockpit door opened and the pilot stepped out, his face pale and his expression tight. He scanned the room briefly before walking directly toward Lauren, his movements quick and deliberate. Lauren turned to him, her irritation evident. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone sharp. The pilot stopped in front of her, his posture tense. "You need to step aside," he said, his voice firm but laced with discomfort. Lauren frowned, her confusion evident. "Excuse me?" she said, crossing her arms. "Why would I need to step aside? I'm handling this." The pilot's gaze flicked to Nathan, then back to Lauren. "I just received a call from management. The owner of the plane is on board, and he's Mr. Williams here," he said, pointing to Nathan. His words hit the room like a thunderclap. The cabin erupted into gasps and murmurs. The nosy socialite audibly inhaled, her eyes widening as she looked back and forth between Nathan and Lauren. "He owns the plane," she whispered, her voice tinged with disbelief. The businessman nodded knowingly, his expression calm. "I had a feeling," he muttered under his breath, as though the revelation confirmed what he had suspected all along. Grace, standing near the galley, froze in place, relief washing over her face as the realization hit her. Nathan wasn't just another passenger, he was someone far more powerful than anyone had realized. Lauren, meanwhile, stared at the pilot, her face turning an alarming shade of red. That can't be true," she stammered, her voice losing its usual sharpness. "There must be some mistake." The tension on the plane was palpable, the silence only broken by the hum of the engines. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, the memory of the slap still fresh in their minds. Lauren stood near the aisle, her arms crossed, her defiance evident despite the growing discomfort around her. Nathan remained seated, calm and composed, his posture as poised as ever. Then, without warning, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an unscheduled landing. Please remain seated and prepare for descent." Passengers murmured in confusion. The businessman leaned toward Nathan, whispering, "What's happening? Why are we landing?" Nathan didn't answer, his expression serene but unreadable. Lauren's brow furrowed, her confidence faltering as she glanced nervously toward the front of the cabin. The plane touched down smoothly, and moments later, a sleek black SUV pulled up directly to the tarmac. The doors opened, and two sharply. Dressed assistants stepped out, their movements brisk and purposeful. They ascended the plane's steps with quiet authority, their presence commanding attention. The moment they entered the cabin, one of them said warmly, "Mr. Williams, everything is ready for your review." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Lauren froze, her face draining of color as the realization hit her like a wave. "Mr. Williams?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The assistants ignored her, their focus entirely on Nathan. "Do you need anything before we proceed?" one of them asked, their tone deferential. Nathan stood slowly, his movements graceful and deliberate. He adjusted his blazer, his calm demeanor radiating power. The passengers watched in stunned silence as Nathan finally spoke, his voice steady and commanding. "I'm Nathan Williams," he began, his gaze sweeping across the cabin. "I'm the owner of this plane, and I'm also the owner of this airline." Lauren's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The confident, condescending flight attendant was now a pale shadow of herself, her earlier bravado replaced by sheer panic. Nathan turned his attention to Lauren, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Lauren, your behavior today has been nothing short of disgraceful," he said, his words cutting through the silence. "You've humiliated yourself, mistreated a passenger, and tarnished the reputation of this airline." Lauren stammered, her voice trembling. I didn't know." Nathan held up a hand, silencing her. "You didn't know because you didn't bother to treat me with the respect that every passenger deserves," he said firmly. "Instead, you made assumptions. You acted with prejudice, and you escalated a situation that could have been handled with basic decency." The passengers nodded in agreement, their earlier silence giving way to murmurs of support. The businessman's face glowed with admiration. Mr. Raymond folded his newspaper neatly, giving Nathan an approving nod. Nathan took a step closer to Lauren, his voice steady. "While you were busy judging me," he began, "you failed to do your job. Your job is to treat every passenger with respect, no matter who they are or what you assume about them. And now there are consequences." Lauren's hands clenched at her sides, her mind racing. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. She could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her, and for the first time, her confidence faltered completely. Nathan gestured to the pilot. "I want this addressed immediately," he said, "and I want to ensure that this doesn't happen again to anyone." The pilot nodded, his demeanor professional. "Understood, Mr. Williams," he said. Lauren took a step back, her mind swirling with panic. She looked toward the exit, her instincts screaming at her to leave before things got worse. But before she could make a move, the pilot stepped in her path, his expression firm. "You're not going anywhere," he said. Nathan's gaze didn't waver. "Lauren, your actions today have proven that you are unfit for this position. Effective immediately, you are fired." The words hung in the air like a final verdict. Lauren's face crumpled and she took a step back, her confidence completely shattered. "Please, Mr. Williams," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean—" Nathan's expression hardened. "You didn't mean to get caught," he said coldly. "But you did, and now you'll face the consequences." At that moment, 2 uniformed police officers boarded the plane, their presence causing a wave of murmurs among the passengers. Lauren's face turned ashen as they approached. "Mr. Williams," one of the officers said respectfully, "we received your report. Are you pressing charges?" Nathan's gaze didn't waver. "Yes," he said firmly. "This individual assaulted me in front of multiple witnesses. I expect her to be held accountable," Lauren gasped, taking a step back. "Wait, this is a misunderstanding," she cried, her voice desperate. "I didn't mean to—" The officer stepped forward, producing a pair of handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault," the officer said. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Lauren's breathing quickened as she realized there was no way out. Her gaze flicked to Nathan, who stood calm and composed, his presence a stark contrast to her unraveling demeanor. Trouble had arrived, and Lauren knew she couldn't escape it. This was only the beginning of her reckoning. Passengers watched, in stunned silence as Lauren's hands were cuffed behind her back. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to protest. "Please, Mr. Williams, I'm sorry," she sobbed. Nathan's expression remained impassive. "Your apology means nothing without accountability," he said quietly. "You made your choices. Now you'll face the consequences." The passengers watched silently, their eyes fixed on Lauren as she disappeared down the aisle, the once dominant flight attendant now a defeated figure, her arrogance replaced by regret and humiliation. Nathan turned back to the cabin, his voice steady as he addressed the passengers. "To everyone here, I apologize for what you had to witness today. This is not the standard of service I expect on my planes. Moving forward, we will ensure that every passenger is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." The cabin erupted into applause, passengers clapping enthusiastically. Mr. Raymond gave a small cheer, while Mrs. Raymond set her knitting aside to clap politely. Nathan turned to Grace, the younger flight attendant who had quietly supported him throughout the ordeal. "Grace," Nathan said, his tone softening, "I noticed your professionalism today. Thank you for stepping up when it mattered. You'll be hearing from my office about a promotion." Grace's eyes widened, and she nodded quickly, her face lighting up with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Williams," she said softly. Nathan smiled, briefly before stepping toward the exit, his assistants following closely behind. The plane's atmosphere had shifted completely, the earlier tension replaced by admiration and relief. Justice had been served, and Nathan had set an example that no one on that flight would forget. Do you think Lauren deserves forgiveness? Or should she face the consequences of her actions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Passengers smiled at the interaction, the warmth of the moment spreading through the cabin. The nosy socialite, who had watched the entire ordeal with wide-eyed fascination, leaned forward in her seat. "Mr. Williams, you're amazing!" she blurted out, her admiration shining brightly. Nathan turned toward her, a gentle smile gracing his lips. "Thank you," he replied. "Remember this moment. It's always worth standing up for what's right." As Nathan stepped off the plane, the fresh air of the tarmac greeted him. The black SUV waited patiently, its driver holding the door open. His assistants walked beside him, briefing him on his next meeting, but Nathan's thoughts lingered on the events of the day. Later, in a televised interview, Nathan sat in a sleek studio, his demeanor as poised as ever. The interviewer leaned forward, clearly captivated. "Mr. Williams, your story has gone viral. Millions of people have seen how you handled this situation. What message do you want to send?" Nathan's gaze was steady as he answered, his voice clear and resolute. "Respect is a right, not a privilege," he said. "Everyone deserves dignity, no matter how they look, where they come from, or what others assume about them. True leadership is about setting that standard and ensuring it's upheld." The interviewer nodded, visibly moved. "And what would you say to those who face similar challenges but don't have the platform you do?" Nathan's expression softened. "I'd say that strength comes from within. Even when you feel invisible, remember your worth. You don't need a title or wealth to demand respect. You just need to stand firm in who you are." A few weeks later, Nathan boarded another flight, this time greeted by a different crew. The energy was warm, welcoming, and professional. The lead flight attendant greeted him with a genuine smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Williams. It's an honor to have you." Nathan returned the smile as he settled into his seat. The atmosphere felt lighter, the service impeccable, but more importantly, it was filled with respect. As he gazed out the window, watching the runway blur into the sky, a sense of peace washed over him. The events of that day had left a lasting impact, not just on the passengers and crew who had witnessed it, but on everyone who had seen the story unfold. Nathan knew that his actions had turned an injustice into a lesson, one that would ripple far beyond that single flight. He smiled, knowing that sometimes the most powerful victories weren't about winning, they were about inspiring change. As the passengers settled into their seats, Nathan quietly reached for his phone. In the aftermath of what had unfolded, he knew this wasn't just about him. It was about changing a system that allowed prejudice and assumptions to thrive. As the jet climbed higher into the clouds, Nathan settled into his seat at the front of the plane. The window beside him framed a breathtaking view of the horizon, the world below fading into a sea of blue and white. He gazed out at the endless sky, a sense of peace washing over him. This wasn't just about confronting prejudice or asserting his authority. It was about turning a moment of humiliation into a powerful lesson, one that would ripple far beyond this single flight. Nathan smiled to himself, his reflection faintly visible in the window. He knew this was just the beginning. With every decision, every policy, and every act of leadership, he was shaping a future where respect and kindness were the standard, not the exception. The plane soared higher, the engines humming softly as it moved toward its destination, and Nathan, seated at the helm of his vision, felt a quiet triumph that no turbulence could ever shake. In a public statement released shortly after the flight, Nathan spoke directly to the world, his words carrying a message that resonated far beyond the confines of the jet. "Luxury isn't about appearances," he said in a heartfelt video that quickly went viral. "It's about the experience we create for everyone. True success is measured not by what you can afford, but by how you treat others. This is why I'm implementing new policies across my airline to ensure that every passenger, no matter who they are, feels valued and respected. The statement sparked conversations across social media, with people applauding Nathan's leadership and his commitment to change. Hashtags like "Respect Above All" and "By Nathan's Vision" trended for days, inspiring others to reflect on their own behavior and biases. If you love this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share with people around you.